Hello, I think you need to put your camera on. There you go.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, all right, thanks. Yeah, good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Have you managed to survive thus far?
Well, yeah, it's been, well, like everyone, it's kind of like, it's all new.
Very
So,
weird.
yeah, it's very weird, very weird.
Have you got a
And
cup
I've
of
got,
tea?
oh,
Get a
no,
cup of tea if you want.
I'll have one later.
Okay.
I've just been in a Zoom meeting, like a 2-hour Zoom meeting, and there was a 15-minute coffee break.
That's not appropriate.
Oh, right.
Not at all.
I said they need to have a thing on that, call of nature or gone to let the cat in or something. All you can do is wave, or what can you do?
Or send a message to the group.
Thumbs up, yeah. Or,
Yeah.
yeah. There's reactions, but there's only a wave and a thumbs up.
Mate, I'm going to put my earpiece in actually because it makes it better for. Oh, crikey, look at that. That's a.
Ah,
That is not cool. Where are you from? I've only just had a little
originally,
accent.
the Midlands.
Oh, right.
But then I was in Manchester for quite a long time,
Okay.
and then I was down south for
You
quite
were
a
in
long.
Brighton for a while, weren't you?
Yeah.
So, I'll just let you know, like, have you got me? Am I in? You got me. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
I can hear you the same
Great.
as ever. Yeah.
I think it makes a difference to the recording. So, what I'm doing at the moment is speaking to people who are sort of part of communities, spiritual communities, and figuring out like what's going on in lockdown. Also, sort of taking down the sort of pedestal that lots of people have put on who lead these sorts of communities and stuff like that. So, like with the yoga teachers, there's a guru culture, right? That's quite weird and odd,
Yeah.
but like trying to bring humanity back into spirituality, basically.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going with this.
You should have dressed in my special Vicar costume.
No, because you're the human. I'm trying to get to
Oh, good. I'm human. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
and also I like that you called it a costume.
Yeah.
Yes, this is my stage wear. Yes.
Yeah. I didn't know I was going to be on stage.
Oh, that is excellent. Oh dear. So yeah, have you managed to do any sort of services on Zoom?
Yeah. So we do. I mean, it was a nightmare. I had a weird time actually because my dad died the day that the lockdown was announced,
No.
and so that was horrible. But then the first 2 weeks of it, everyone was getting on Zoom and everything, and I was like just grieving and sorting all that out.
Yeah.
And so when I sort of came to life again, I suddenly realised I got to sort it all out. So I do a live stream Eucharist on Facebook, like just a communion service that I was doing in my garden because it's been quite sunny, and it's just me and an altar and bread and wine, and I do the service, and lots of people watching that. And then at 11:30 we have a Zoom coffee, so about 20 people come on Zoom and we have a chat together about what sort of week we've done.
Oh, that's nice.
Monday to Friday we have morning prayer at 9 o'clock on Zoom, which is a bit odd. We can have all these Zoom conversations about Zoom and spirituality, but
Zoom.
yeah, but basically it's really odd. It's really odd, but it's good. It's been okay. It's been okay.
Better than not having it, isn't it? Basically.
What?
Better than not having it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, I find it very odd trying to convey either physical movement or spiritual antics over this. It doesn't, I think it'll be another type of practice to kind of let go into it a bit. But
my friend who's doing training for Alexander technique said there was a massive row in the Alexander community about whether it was okay to do it on Zoom or not. And they've agreed that they are going to do it. And it's working okay at the moment. But there are some sort of more old school or whatever saying you just can't do this on Zoom. It's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, all of the traditions would say that, really.
Yeah.
Didn't start off with the internet, so of course it's just a secondary measure that we're implementing out of necessity, really.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good that your community's still going. That's great. Yeah. Have you found any positives that have come out of it? Like, has there been anything really cool that's kind of come out of it?
I suppose, like everyone else, it's been quite good because the other people have come along or joined in who wouldn't come near a church building, but they've thought, oh, it's Phil, I know Phil, I can just watch him, and it's kind of all in private.
Yeah.
Kind of like church porn. They can lock themselves in a room and watch a bit of God without the shame of being thought religious.
Don't get caught watching that God porn.
Yeah. No, I wasn't watching that. I was just you know, just on RedTube.
GodTube.
Yeah, GodTube. Yeah.
Amazing. That is true. I found that loads of people are joining in with yoga that would never normally be interested at all, because it's either a bit weird or a bit, you know, only certain types of people do it, or they have a preconception about teachers all being up their own bum, which they are, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They don't realise that there are people who are real people, which is why I wanted to speak to you, because you're definitely my favourite vicar. I was like, there's this one guy who's like a real person. What?
You're my favourite yoga teacher, right?
Oh, yay! Do you think we're all witches when we do yoga raves in your church?
No, I love it. I love the yoga rave stuff and the gong bath and everything.
Yeah.
And everyone knows that I think it's okay, so people are like, oh yeah, no, there's another gong bath thing.
Yeah. So
I think it's really good. I think it's really good, and it's bringing sort of spiritual variety and difference to things. Or it's just, and it's also another way, a bit like the Tai Chi with Mark. It's another way of getting people to engage with their own spiritual life.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why online stuff has been good, because people have been able to do it without thinking. They don't have to come into a building, which is frightening. And it makes me realise that the service we do every Sunday, which is the Eucharist, the bread and the wine, is quite excluding, because it's a participative thing. And you want, on the one hand, you really want people to participate and join in. But on the other hand, that's a lot of new people don't want that. They want to come and see and dip their toe in the water. They don't want there to be a moment in the service where they either have to get up or they stay sat down. You know, they just want to watch it.
Yeah, it's different because I was brought up, you know, I went to church when I was little, so you kind of get used to it, don't you? But for people who are either going through any mental health issues or anything like that, or it feels like you're being witnessed, which can feel a bit too vulnerable for people. They just kind of want to sit there and absorb and hide, which is why it's better Zoom.
And exactly, and people are like, they feel that they might be, by coming into the building, they might be saying, I believe this, and this, and actually, I'm forever saying, really, you don't have to do that. You know, just the classic belonging thing before believing. But people don't. Yeah, people are terrified, really, and think that you're going to jump on them.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I do the same sort of thing. I say, you know, you don't even have to have a spiritual belief to come to yoga. You can take what I say either as a science, physical thing, or you can take it as God, whatever you feel like, basically. So it's interesting, isn't it, how you have to communicate quite openly and diversely, I think.
Yeah.
So I think you said that you were in Brighton for a while, and so I used to go to Brighton Pride quite a lot, and I got attacked by Bible bashers quite a lot.
Oh, really?
Oh God, yeah. They loved it. And I just wondered what your congregation there was like. Was it mixed, sort of? Did you have any gay people come in?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, in Brighton we definitely did. And my parish where I was a curate, like my very first, when I was training, the vicar said to me, he was gay, and he said, oh, it's all queers and old dears here. And it was. Yes! What a great combination, queers and old dears. And so I kind of began in that kind of setting. and then yeah, and I used to go to Pride, and now I think quite a big group of churches go to Pride, and so, which is really good. And I've been to Pride in Oxford once with a group of local Christians and been supportive. But it's and that's quite weird when you've had people, Christians who are homophobic, sort of at the side, and you're marching your dog collar or whatever. But no, it is different now. I mean, we're a member of Inclusive Church, and generally people know we're part of Inclusive Church, and that we don't.
I didn't know that. That's great. Right.
Yeah, but actually that is true. I mean, how do people?
How do you know?
How do you know? And generally, I think without people knowing you, knowing me, or knowing, they think probably this is going to be something which is going to be problematic. And of course, it still is problematic in some Oxford churches, particularly in the evangelical tradition. It's more likely to be that you would be homophobic, but no one says that anymore. They say we welcome, but so it's really difficult. You used to 10 years ago to be able to go on church websites and find out that they were anti-women or homophobic very quickly, and now it's very difficult to see, because everyone's very on message.
Yeah.
And you have to know the culture to know which ones are going to have those views.
Yeah, that's true. You don't know until you know, kind of thing.
No.
You go. And it is intimidating, I'm a confident person, so I wouldn't necessarily wouldn't put me off, but someone who is in a bit of a pickle, and they need that community, they need that guidance and love, and it feels like, am I going to create more trauma by turning up to a church and getting told that I've made life choices?
Like, oh, I know, that's oh dear. Yeah.
So yeah, it's still, I mean, I didn't know anything about that was even a thing. What did you call it? An inclusive church?
Oh yeah, there's an organisation called Inclusive Church that says we don't discriminate on gender, ethnicity, mental health, or sexuality.
Oh, fab.
So and sexuality, I suppose, is been a big issue. But I mean, although it's interesting, because there's one thing to say we don't, and then in reality, I don't know what it means that we have some Afro-Caribbean people in our church, but our style of worship is quite traditional in some ways, and it's very difficult. And those Caribbean people are with us because the British Empire offered them our style of worship in the early 20th century in the Caribbean, or so they recognise it. But it's a very complex picture.
It is, isn't it?
All that kind of post-colonial thing as well. It's quite difficult to unpack.
Yeah, really, crikey, it is. Yeah, there's a lot in inclusion, isn't there? Inclusion, but inclusion means a lot.
I know, because on the one hand, I think we say we're inclusive, and also, deaf and people who are deaf and people and partially sighted and all of that, and what we actually do to support them is probably not as much as we could.
It's hard, isn't it? You need kind of specialist care in some situations for them to come with a carer.
I think it's kind of holding on to who you are spiritually and the richness of your tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, because sometimes I feel you become so obsessed about being inclusive that you're endlessly throwing stuff out, and there's some good stuff that you're throwing out that you're no longer doing. Yeah, which must happen in yoga as well to a certain extent.
It does, because I think in that respect, what I do is I say, well, this class is for anyone who is over 60 with or with less, differently abled. But what I do try to do is a blend of sort of hardcore yoga for people who are like, oh, I've got to do the strong stuff, to people who are quite interested in doing more wafty breath stuff, which is great for everyone. So I guess just by offering a variety of classes, people can find their way. And for me, the yoga isn't even in the practice, it's in the community bit. So I guess, like with you guys having tea afterwards, that's for me, that's the most inclusive bit, right? Because you can just have a chat.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
just listening to them is the main part of yoga for me, really.
But what's interesting about that, because that's a similar discussion we have in the church, about, you know, what is community and what is spirituality, and people who are sort of not believers in any sense would say, I really value what you do in the community, Phil, like helping the poor or feeding people or looking after the street drinkers or whatever, but I don't get the other thing. And obviously I would say that we exist because of the other thing, and that's what sends us out. And so there is a spiritual practice which is linked to the way that we see community. And then it's kind of how you link the two things together. I don't know. Difficult thing to do.
I guess it's just a path, isn't it? We all come into that spiritual community bit, but just from the different paths. That's kind of how I've always seen it, because it all ends up at the same place generally. Just be kind and don't be an idiot.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
basically, don't be abusive, and that's it. Oh dear. How, like, with boundaries and things, so this is something that I have to navigate all the time. So boundaries with people with issues, you know, because they might come to service or one of your community sort of offerings, and there's always someone who's, for me, like, who's quite needy, and, you know, balancing empathy and care with personal boundaries is something that's become a thing.
Oh yeah, it's massive. That is, it's massive, and particularly in our roles, I suppose, when you're kind of the facilitator or the coordinator, you're the person who people look to kind of having an opinion about those issues, like people on the edge. And they are often on the edge, and so we have a few people who are very needy in different ways. Some of whom come to church, and some who don't come to church, but they're needy, so they still want to be in touch with me for whatever reason. And I can't always see them when they want to see me, and I can't always offer them exactly what they want, and that's quite difficult, really. And I think I was bad at that, because I think when you start, you're quite unboundaries, because I just want to love everyone.
Exactly.
And then you realise, oh, actually, there's got to be some structure in this, because this person would come and see me twice a day, every day.
Right.
And they kind of will suck the blood out of you if you give them space. But then they need supporting and managing as well. So it's boundaries for them, and also boundaries for yourself, I think, because if you have a day when you're having sort of 2 or 3 intense phone calls about people who are living with cancer or close to death or whatever, which often doesn't happen at all for weeks. It's not like I'm endlessly dealing with end of life stuff or whatever at all. Not like some people, but it is stressful, and you have to kind of be able to back off a bit. And I have to be Phil, who's just watching NAF TV or having a drink or whatever, and not because you can't keep up that intensity all the time.
Well, no, it's not realistic. It's not realistic at all. It's not healthy, and
but it kind of smashes your kind of romantic vision of that you've given your life to a spiritual practice, and that you're living this spiritual practice in the reality of community.
But you are still, because you know, they say in yoga anyway, you have to be kind to yourself before you can be kind to anyone else. So first rule of spirituality in yoga, they say you've got to kind of look after yourself, and by watching NAF tea and having a drink, that's what you're doing. So you're still in everything. We're still doing it all. It's just you know, self-judgment has got to go, really, in that respect, especially when you know your heart's in the right place and your intention.
Yeah. I know, but it is difficult, because I think you judge yourself on how many people are coming. Which you shouldn't do, but you do. You judge yourself on am I successful numerically? Which are not particularly here, and so that can be and everyone says, oh, it's not about numbers, it's about depth, you know, and it's but these are kind of things that you wrestle with, because it's like any business in a way, you know, although I can still live in this house and still have this church, but if no one comes to it, then you know, then you're not yeah, and you're not really as feeling as fulfilled by what you do.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't realize it was the same in
Well, to a certain extent, except that I suppose it'd take a long time before I'd be moved somewhere else. You know, and it's okay. We're still getting sort of 50 or 60 on a Sunday, but it's not
pretty good.
Yeah, but it's sometimes it creeps into the 40s, and then for weeks at a time, and then you're thinking, oh, this is a bit thin.
It's like, I guess, like, people shouldn't really know about you, because I didn't realize that people didn't know all of these things about you, right? I just thought that everyone knew that you were cool. And
yeah, everyone should know that.
Preconceptions about Christians in general, right? Like, like when I was little, I went to church and I loved the stories about Jesus. I loved all the whole thing about him. But what I didn't like was all the Christians.
Yes.
The judgy Christians. I was like, well, that geezer's a legend. But what I don't like are all these poxy fellas telling me what I can and can't do for the rest of my life.
But what's really interesting about it is that on a Sunday, because of who I am, I suppose, we're quite conservative, or we look quite conservative. I'm wearing funny clothes and I'm doing rather ritualized things all the time. But if you go to a big evangelical church, no one will be wearing robes, and the music will be much more kind of poppy. But the theology generally is a bit more conservative, a bit darker, but it takes a while to get to it. So we're kind of a weird combination of things.
But the way that you deliver stuff, I mean, you're like, do you talk open, like, are you a bit real in there as well as talk, you know?
I think so. In the sermon, the sermon, but I suppose a lot of the rest is quite formal, and all this virus thing is making everyone rethink, like, what the hell are we doing, and how is Christianity going to be accessible, and spirituality going to be accessible in the future, given that model of people coming, in our tradition, people coming to church on a Sunday for an hour's fairly formal worship with some hymns, and then having coffee and then going home, is kind of slightly falling apart.
Right.
You really reminded me of Stacey Dooley.
Who's that?
You know that woman who's on telly with the long ginger hair, who she does those programs, and she's all like because you're saying community, like she does really intense documentaries.
Oh, wicked!
But they're really cool.
I'm going to write her name down. Stacey Dooley.
Yeah. She's got long ginger hair, and she's quite young, and she's got a bit of a Londony accent.
Right. Yeah, I lived in London for 10 years, so sometimes.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Between here,
I think her name's Stacey Dooley. Yeah, she does.
I'll write her down. I just wrote it down with my very grown-up unicorn pen, Phil.
Oh, very good.
Isn't it?
Oh, that's excellent. Maybe we need to be moving into a kind of unicorn world.
Maybe you need to be a unicorn priest, and I think you'd have literally the whole of Oxford.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Marketing tips.
Thank you. I'll just jot that down.
Oh dear, excellent. Another thing that I was thinking about is how feminism is a big thing, and there's a lot of debate about whether God is a woman or a man. I mean, and whether the Holy Spirit takes a feminine essence or not.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what your. It's all just very interesting.
No, I mean, I suppose I've sort of grown up in quite a liberal household, so I didn't have a gender. Gender was in terms of God. I didn't. I suppose I thought God isn't male or female, but God has attributes of both, and God can be mother, and a lot of our traditional language is very father orientated.
Yeah.
And but sometimes, particularly when I'm at the school, when I'm doing assembly, I say Father, Mother, God, and there are feminine images for God, but it is true that there is a lot of there's a hell of a lot of patriarchy out there to cut through. And again, it's that thing of like, but if you just throw it all out the window, then what do you, if you've got this, 2,000-year-old tradition, and how do you hold on to what's important, and who's, so it is difficult. So I'm just about to get a curate, like an assistant, Claire, and she's 27 or 26 or 27. So that's going to be really interesting as I think. But we've often, in this parish, we've often had women on the staff, but there hasn't been a woman vicar here yet. So that's interesting. I think the gender thing is really interesting, and particularly with my kids now, who've taught me all about the trans thing, which
That's
was
right. Yeah.
which was something that I was like behind the curve on a bit.
Right.
And there was some really funny trans comedian going, the thing about heterosexuals is they're so obsessed about gender. Like, they want to label everyone up. Is he a man or is she a woman? I want to know what they are. So why are heterosexuals so obsessed about gender? And so I'm trying not to be obsessed about labeling everyone up.
Yeah. It's really interesting because, you've got feminism where women want to be upheld for being women, and then you've got trans or non-binary people who don't want to be labeled at all.
Yeah.
And I think God's a bit non-binary, but also both.
Yes.
And then, so I'm actually talking to a trans woman tomorrow night. She's called Asifa, and she's Muslim. She's a practicing Muslim trans, and she's the first British trans Muslim out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's really cool, really strong human.
Is she in Oxford?
No, I think she's in London. But I can't wait to speak to her, as well. Really, really cool. And she's very, very open. So she wants to, because like you said, you didn't really know much about it, which people don't until we talk about it. And there's open dialogue to destigmatize and inform people. Otherwise, it's just like people don't know. And also you're a bit scared to say things. You're like, well, what do I say? How do I? And
no, definitely. And I'm married to Paul, and we've got 3 children, and they're all girls. So I kind of get it 24/7. And I've, and my...
You and my dad both.
Yeah. And one of my daughters is lesbian, or whatever you call the word. So I feel I have a good exposure to it. But I thought that I was very passionate about feminism, and I realised that I've kind of got a lot to learn, and actually I'm in much more of a learning situation than I thought I was, I suppose.
I think we all are, really.
I think there's a slightly kind of patriarchal thing of generously handing things down to women as giving them access to the male patriarchal world.
Do this upon you as a man. Here, have your feminism.
Yeah, you are welcome.
You are
so included. And that's the old kind of liberal feminism, which was like a ticket to a man's world. You can join our world.
Yeah.
But I think the good thing about feminism is that it's changing the shape of the world and the dynamics of the world, and that should be painful for men and difficult for men because it's about righting the balance. There will be a disruption in it, a kind of upturning of things.
It's really well put.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, the Jesus thing is that Jesus is inclusive, and that Jesus speaks to people as they are and where they are, and doesn't kind of, and Jesus turns upside down established patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks to the woman at the well at noon, who was from another ethnic group, which he shouldn't really have been doing, and women become, although I know he has 12 male disciples, but women are important in his ministry with Mary Magdalene and people like that. So he's kind of always, for me, he's always opening doors to a wider understanding of what being human is and what human community looks like.
Yeah, just always coming from a place of love and acceptance rather than than human rules, basically.
Yeah.
Handmade rules. So that's. Did you know that in India they believe strongly that Jesus was a yogi?
Oh, really?
So when I was in India 10 years ago, I saw this book and it was Jesus was a yogi, and I was like, what? And I
Was
went, facts. It's
it?
obviously
Yeah,
let's have a look at photos of him in India.
yeah.
But they have a really good explanation, like there's kind of some missing years of his life kind of thing. And they're like, what he did is he just went off to India and became a yogi and then went around shazamming everyone, get rid of leprosy. Do you know what I mean? That's gone.
Excellent.
And also, you know, all of his sort of spiritual magic tricks are what yogis sort of say that they can do as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, he also knew how to market himself, didn't he, with the wine trick, let's face it.
Yeah, yeah. But I think all these things, I think that's good that saying Jesus was a yogi, because it's saying, I suppose it's good for me because it's saying Jesus is someone who we understand in our tradition, or is part of our spiritual understanding, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's that kind of interfaith thing, which is so interesting as well, really. Yeah, and increasingly I'm sort of slightly influenced by little elements of Hinduism and things, and it's really I think that's part of a coming together.
Yeah.
And the question for me, the turning point question of the interfaith thing for me is that there are these, you know, 6 major world religions and many more, but which are very ancient. So why did God make all of these?
Yeah.
It's not that ours is right and yours is wrong, but there must be some reason why this is the case. So we must be able to find spiritual truth in other people's traditions and practices.
Well, I don't think that God did make them all. I think we made them all.
Well, yeah, no, but I think that I don't know. Yeah, I think we made them all, but I think that doesn't.
But they all came from one thing, is what I mean. Like the same essence and the same.
We separated them. Yeah, maybe.
The culture, because of language, because of countries.
Yeah.
Because you know, human behavior. I mean, the Bible was written by humans, right?
Yeah.
So that's the sort of thing.
What's interesting about it is that when you're in your own tradition, and I'm quite keen on the idea that I live in my tradition and keep alive my tradition, because I don't think that I can just go around. I think in order to spiritually go more deeply, you have to kind of be in a tradition to a certain extent to go deeper into it. And so I can have times when I'm able to go journey a little bit into other traditions, but I kind of have to be in my tradition because that's what keeps me disciplined about where I am and kind of focused, I suppose.
That sounds fair enough. Yeah, it keeps you grounded in it, and then and not confused. That's it's just keeping an open mind and learning. That's all part of it, isn't it? For sure. I think I could identify as any of them. I'm probably the other end of the spectrum, Phil. I am all of them. But that's the difference between, you know, someone who's grounded like you and someone with ADHD. So
I don't know. Someone was saying to me last week, Phil, do you think you've got ADHD?
You have got ADHD for sure, but I don't think you've got ADHD. You can.
I am quite like, whoa.
Again, we really need to put like a little manifesto together about you, Phil. Get it out there.
LGBT, women, ADHD.
Or good. I mean, you know.
Neurodiversity. I love that neurodiversity thing, actually.
Yeah.
You know, the ADHD or whatever these things that we've labelled up as, or autism or whatever, we've labelled up as defective things. But actually, they're different ways of being human that people have, and they're not disability.
No, it's just another angle on life, isn't it? Really.
Although they're not, they are things that people need supporting in, but
they can often lead to sort of different
insights,
experiences and insights. Exactly. Yeah. It's not the same, I don't think, as, I don't know. Yeah, the word disability is tricky for me as well.
Yes. Because
I'm dyslexic, and they always used to ask me, guys, used to be a lawyer, and when I was a lawyer, they always used to ask me to list that as a disability. which I kind of accepted in the terms of that I needed different coloured paper in the printer and stuff like that. And then there was my whole ADHD thing, and I was like, guys, just let me get on with my job.
Yeah.
You know, but it was nice that they were trying to acknowledge and accept, basically. Yeah. It's just yeah, interesting.
Rach, have you gone from being a lawyer person to being a yogi?
Yeah, and in between that, I went to Thailand and did some Muay Thai and had a couple of fights.
Did you?
Yeah.
What sort of fights?
Muay Thai, Thai kickboxing.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you a kickboxer?
I sure am. I've done martial arts since I was 6, which is actually where my initial spiritual curiosity sparked from, sort of meditation and watching people do Tai Chi and yeah, sort of Kung Fu. There's quite a lot of sort of Buddhism in there, and yeah.
But
So,
would you label yourself as attached to a religious tradition?
not at all.
So, because you might think of yoga as attached to Hinduism to a certain extent, and some stuff as attached to Buddhism.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't label yourself as...
No, I don't think that I practice any of the sort of religious aspects of those, but when I'm practicing yoga, and I like the philosophy behind, or the explanations behind yoga, because yoga was before Hinduism, yoga was before Buddhism, yoga's just always been naughty.
Naughty. Yeah, harsh but fair.
So
you are the beginning.
it's just, you know, breathing. You know, that's been around for a while, Phil.
Yeah, and before breathing there was yoga.
It was actually yoga that birthed breathing.
Yeah.
Hashtag spiritual arrogance. Oh dear. I was going to ask you another thing. Oh yeah, I was going to say about where you live, because we've discussed this as well. So you're right in the middle of sort of, there's quite a lot of stuff that goes on in the graveyard behind your church. And like my stereotypical idea of a vicar is that they would never be able to deal with that. Like, so just for people who don't know, in Cowley where you live, there's a lot of drugs, and a lot of, like, there's sexual assaults in there as well. I know that my ex-girlfriend was a CSI, and she said she was always down there for rape cases. And you know, you're going to have to deal with that segment of society that, I don't know, sort of a romanticized view of being a vicar is that you're in this quintessential village and everyone's pure. But you're kind of doing the real work. You're in there with the real.
I know. And it's, again, it's got that awkwardness, because there's a romance about being the kind of urban vicar who's helping those who find themselves on the margins. But the reality is quite different. Like, so last week we did a little memorial service in the churchyard for Bonnie, who's one of the street drinkers who died, and Lulu, his partner, was very upset. And we were supposed to have 10, but there were like 28 people, and we weren't really social distancing, and the police were there, and the police were not happy that there were so many people there. But it's very difficult when you live quite a chaotic life to and that's just me, to kind of you know, do everything right.
Yeah.
So, but we had a little service, and we played what's that name? Lewis Capaldi, Bruises, on a speaker system. It's really lovely, actually. It was really moving, and then they had some sandwiches, and I think some drinks, but because they're not supposed to. But then the week before, I'd been really annoyed because a younger group of kind of addicts had been sort of just outside my bedroom window, just under the back door of the church, and just being really noisy. Someone said I should play classical music, so I played them to try and make them move on. I played them Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, Mahler 2, and some Elgar, but they just loved it all. They were there for the classical music.
They calmed down a bit, though.
Yeah, they just thought, oh, this is a nice vibe, a bit of classical music.
Yeah.
I don't know, they just stayed sort of smoking and.
I thought that it was just God's soundtrack coming
out.
up.
Yeah.
Like, we've arrived, guys. He's accepted us.
But the week before, we'd looked out of our window and there was some people having a shag just behind the church.
Really?
Just looking down from our window, you could just see this massive bum, and it's like, that's a bit unfortunate. But then these people are a bit sort of, that maybe that's where they have to be. I don't know.
I guess there's nowhere else to go.
But sometimes I get annoyed because it's very noisy, and it can be frustrating when it's noisy. But other times I go and chat with them, and I spend time with them, and they know me.
Yeah.
And you end up, giving people money, and then thinking I really shouldn't have given them money, and I don't. So I don't come to any conclusion about it, really. I don't come to any except that my conclusion is that my job should be with those people.
Yeah.
That my spirituality is about saying God is with those people first. That's God's bias.
Definitely.
So, but I don't live out God's bias in that I live in my big house and get annoyed with people shagging under the bedroom window.
Well, I think, I'm not a man of cloth, and I would get annoyed with all of those things as well. So it just shows that you're a normal human.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at least you're not going out there having a go at them, which is what people would do. So you're maintaining a medium.
And they are. I mean, they do have a very definite kind of moral code, and they're generally fine. I mean, there's been big drugs fines and things at the bottom of the churchyard, and so and all of that world of drugs and addiction is not a nice world, I think, that for the people caught up in it.
No, it's
and it certainly looks different. I think when you're 20 and sort of having a spliff and thinking it's really cool, and then when you're like 52 and thinking actually, this is really grim, that these people who are still glamorizing this drugs thing, but actually they're really on the edge, and they're being badly treated by the people above them in the chain. And then people are getting into addictions which are really difficult to live with and really difficult to fund, and then it's kind of scary. So that's another impenetrable problem, really.
Well, it isn't. I mean, you're doing, people tend to be ignoring that sort of sector of the world and of society. Yeah. So by not ignoring them, it is creating some sort of openness.
But generally, I think people are really touched by it. Like when I did that little memorial service, all of the people who found out about it were like, "Oh, it's so lovely." Yeah. So I think it's partly that people, a bit like with spirituality, people don't know a way in.
Yeah.
And they know that they would like to help people and they'd like to be good to people, but then they see that they don't know a way in to do that. And I'm just lucky enough to have a little bit of a way in sometimes.
Yeah.
It's a bit like giving money to people in the street, isn't it? You kind of want to do it, but also it's maybe not a good idea. And
exactly.
Should I give them a sandwich or buy them a coffee or
Yeah, exactly. I've offered food to people before and they've gone, well, I can't eat that. I've offered them like some apples and they said, it's things you wouldn't even think about. I've got no teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like, we're not educated in this sort of thing.
No.
You can have all the good intentions of in the world, but putting it into practice is really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, you're doing a good job by not shouting at them, letting them crack on.
Most of the time.
Oh, definitely. I wanted to as well just say I don't know how inappropriate some of the things are that you have to deal with, but that's probably one of them. And I thought that this was, and you messaged me saying that there was that photo on Facebook, and some page had been created for your church, and I don't know how that was created.
Oh yeah.
And there was a photo of a badge that said "I love Cog."
Oh yeah.
It was affiliated with your church, and it was like,
that's right. I'd forgotten that.
Where did this photo come from? I don't even know. So it turns out that Facebook can create them if enough people put a location on their photographs.
Oh really?
And then it's just a community page that no one knows.
I know, and we want to be inclusive. It's not that we're anti-cock in the church. Everyone's welcome.
We love it for sure, yeah.
But I know, and that's very difficult because you very quickly also, like what we were saying earlier about what people's perception is of what the church is. So when you sort of say, oh, we don't like this thing that says I love cop, people think, oh yeah, that's because it's a vicar who doesn't love cop, you
It
know.
was more about, I was thinking about a little old lady who is quite,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
would upset her. That's where I wasn't thinking, I mean, I felt the stress for you, but I felt like,
yeah,
well, if that was my community, you know, I've got people in their 70s and 80s who come to me,
yeah,
and they're not all like my nan and rude.
yeah,
Some of them would be not necessarily offended, but it would be a jolt to them. So it's more
yeah,
like
yeah.
looking after them. Yeah, it definitely didn't feel like you were coming at it from a militant point of view.
No, I know, but all those things are difficult because they're all about people's perceptions of you, aren't they?
Yeah,
And that's
totally.
always difficult until people have met you and know
Yeah,
you.
exactly. So that's why not being in your costume, as you put it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh dear, excellent. So yeah, I was going to say, I think that's about it, really.
So what are these for? Um,
So I'm doing
uh,
interviews since lockdown. I created an online festival which had 10,000 people come to it, and it was a free online festival for well-being and joy.
oh wow,
And
yeah.
joy is a big component in there, so I like using
Joy.
joy.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm just in the process of becoming a third order Franciscan, which is a kind of like when St. Francis set up his monks, he said, but everyone ought to be able to be a Franciscan. So I set up this third order of people who live secular life, but they can follow the rule a bit. And one of the rules of the tertiary third order Franciscans is joy.
Oh, right.
Yeah, joy is really central. Yeah, to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the one thing that everyone wants and needs, you know.
Mm,
So,
mm,
and you don't have to be spiritual to know that it's good for you or to connect with it.
no, exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's like the most inclusive aspect, I think, of it, because happiness is like, well, that kind of depends on lots of things, but I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I find joy more tangible and effectual.
Yes, and joy is not, I don't think, in a way that happiness is. Joys can be something that you can feel in all sorts of emotional states, I think.
Yeah,
And so it's a deeper
grasp
thing.
at it. Like with happiness,
Yeah,
try to keep the happiness.
yeah,
With joy, it's just like, oh, this is happening right now, and that's great.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, and that's also part of Zen. The Zen tradition is laughter and humor and stuff as well, which
yeah,
joy. So that's a huge part of when I'm teaching my classes and stuff, and that's why I brought it into the festival. So we had some comedians as well on the
yeah.
online festival. If you want to do a talk on the next one, that would be good. But that's what these are sort of for. Sort of,
Yeah.
it's an online community, breaking down some boundaries and some stereotypes and
Yeah, yeah.
destigmatizing things.
Oh, that sounds really good, right? Really
Yeah.
good.
So
Oh, that was brilliant.
you just need to get more people to your church, basically.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So this
Um,
is the start.
so where's this? Are these interviews going to be going out to be shown to people on your?
On the festival, um,
Excellent.
and on a YouTube channel. So I've actually called these the ZenAF show.
Oh yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, so
What's AF mean?
as Thuc.
Oh, I can't believe that. That's funny because I look after 6 of the curates, the like assistant new vicars.
Uh-huh.
We have a WhatsApp group, and we talked about being woke, and someone had written on our WhatsApp group, woke AF,
Yeah, now you know.
and one of the oldest people, who's actually a professor, who's in our group, sent a message underneath saying, "What is AF?" And I was like, "Oh my god, I can't tell
Flip.
her."
Just say it's flip.
The flip is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woke flip, like super woke. And
So I'm on a special channel which is called Zen as Fuck. I like this. Very good. Very good.
Oh yeah, that's why it's AF, because then it's down to the people as how they
Yeah,
say
yeah.
it.
So
But sentiment is there.
I need to be able to find myself, so that's good.
It's on my it's going to be on my YouTube channel as well. I'm also submitting it to TV because this sort of thing in isolation about real humans, real human connection, breaking down boundaries, because we don't have the physical capabilities right now to go out and hang out with people. It's like we all search for genuine human connection and joy.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that's what this is. It's a platform. For instance, I'm interviewing a Sifa, the trans woman, and then been interviewing all of these incredibly famous, which is weird to say, really famous yogis who have got millions of followers, millions. But I want to get the person behind the class. I want people to connect with the human that is behind it all.
Yeah.
Because you always feel there's a barrier. You go to a class or you go to a service and you feel there's a barrier because they're in their costume, they're doing the things.
Yeah.
And some people do still feel connected, but I'm trying to, there's like a 90% of the world doesn't feel that connection.
Yeah.
I want to get them. I want to get the 90%.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, good. Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. Let's go. You've got to learn how to turn water to wine, okay?
Yeah, well, I know. I need a bit more work on that.
I'll go back to school, mate.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Excellent. So, yeah, that's where you're going to be.
Very good. So do you edit me?
I can edit, yeah.
Or you just put it out? Or
It's completely up to you, really, what's what. I think the more genuine and open everything is, the better. But
yeah.
because no one's saying anything offensive. Nothing's offensive. It's just human and real.
Yeah.
We're trying to engage the people who are so switched off from all of this. And I'm not saying that we all have to swear and talk about sex and drugs all the time, but what we're saying is that we're not going to talk about that.
Yes. No, exactly.
It's not a barrier.
No.
It doesn't form a part of my spiritual practice, but it's not a barrier to it.
Yeah, and if you saw you teaching a yoga class or me on a Sunday morning, we'd still be the people who are sat here now talking.
Exactly, which would make me go to it way more.
Yeah, but we're following our spiritual practice. But
and there are obviously going to be more boundaries in a class or in a practice or in a service. And that's what should be, it should be respectful and grounded and following the rituals and things.
But exactly.
That's not all there is.
No.
Yeah. So I just thought it was a good idea, basically.
Yeah. Oh well, thank you.
It's all right. Thank you. Great. I didn't just want yogis. I wanted, if you've got any suggestions of people as well.
Yeah.
Of anyone else that you think. Don't have to give them to me now, but if you think of someone all in a community, like it's basically people in a community, and spirituality is a thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. That's a really good thing to do, right?
Well, it's a bit like as well what you said ages ago, and I said, can we use, or you suggested using the church for a gong bath. I was aghast. I was like, pagans and hippies in a church doing magic. What you said was, well, it's a community space, and I was like, what? It is a community space, but vicars don't say that.
Yeah, no, I know, but I really do think the church needs to kind of understand itself as a spiritual space, but a community spiritual space. Not increasingly, it's got to do that. Otherwise, churches will just disappear.
Yeah, for sure. It's that was a just revolutionary statement.
That gong was lovely. That gong bath in the church was lovely, actually.
Yeah, they're all mind blowing, and it's so much better in the church. The acoustics and the setting, it's so nice. And watching everyone come in with basically a bed.
Yes.
Turn up with all their stuff. My spiritual path is actually just to lay down.
Lay down, and listen to some really chilled out music.
I've just gone out to God's house to have a little lay down.
Yeah.
That would be a nice thing to do, maybe, for the people behind the church. We'll call them the people behind the church. That might be a nice thing one day to do.
Yeah. I know, and you don't come inside generally.
Maybe if you told them that it was a load of hippies and witches, they might.
Yeah, they might come in.
And then they'll go in. Everyone who goes into that church is just like really impressed with how beautiful it is. You know, everyone just goes in and they're speechless.
It is lovely. It is beautiful, I think. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice. So thanks for having us.
No, pleasure. No, thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to stop the recording and say thank you.
Okay.
I'll still say hi, bye to you after this. So thanks very
Okay.
much, Phil.
Okay. Thank you.